I'm sick and tired of this social media trend of people wanting to be autistic. Self-diagnosis isn't valid.
So you're saying that you can't be autistic until a doctor tells you you are?
No, they're just undiagnosed. You can't diagnose without data. Medicine is based on science, peer-reviewed studies, and consensus.
Show me your data. Show me the study that proves self-diagnosis is far less accurate than medical diagnosis.
Well, there isn't. Self-diagnosed people are spreading misinformation about autism online without a doctor to inform you.
Misinformation like autism doesn't happen in girls, or like all autistics have a savant, or like exposure therapy is an effective treatment for sensory issues, or like that shock therapy is beneficial for autistics.
See, exactly.
Those are all things the medical field has claimed or still claims about autism.
So what are you saying? People should just take a self-assessment quiz and be done?
When access to well-informed, equitable medical care is not possible, absolutely.
There will be so many people misdiagnosing.
The accredited self-assessment tests for autism have been found to be 80% accurate. So if you take multiple accredited self-assessment tests, the accumulated accuracy increases.
Well,
these accredited tests can be found on embraceautism.com, along with information on how old the test is, the accuracy rating of the test. It also includes a write-up of each test's limitations and what other tests you can take that could fill in that test's gaps.
But with rigorous in-person assessments, a medical professional will be more accurate.
How does a doctor accurately diagnose someone who is an autistic adult who heavily masks their autism?
Well,
they'll look at the accredited self-assessment quizzes. These are the same tests that are on Embrace Autism, and that's how I got my diagnosis. The assessor told me that my self-assessment quizzes that I brought in were more rigorous than the DSM-5 itself.
Still, a trained medical staff...
Do you know how often doctors misdiagnose conditions in general? Misdiagnosis rates among mental and emotional conditions is pretty astronomical. 65.9% for major depressive disorder, 92.7% for bipolar disorder, and 97.8% for social anxiety disorder. A 2019 study found that 25% of kids evaluated had their autism traits overlooked and went undiagnosed. Really, you have a bunch of medical providers who are inadequately trained, or many times incorrectly trained, on outdated and harmful misconceptions of autism. So you act like people's choices are either self-diagnosing and getting it wrong, or going to a doctor and getting it right, when in reality you can get it right self-diagnosing, and you can be misdiagnosed or go undiagnosed by seeing a doctor too.
I still think there is a higher probability of self-diagnosing than...
Most adults who have gotten an official autism diagnosis were first self-diagnosed. They would never have started the arduous and expensive process of getting an autism diagnosis had they not first self-diagnosed. You could be treating self-diagnosis as an important step in the diagnosis and treatment process instead of vilifying it.
But why not just get the doctor's diagnosis in the first place? Why even bother self-diagnosing? You're not an expert.
You know what it takes to get an autism diagnosis? Privilege. Money, sometimes thousands of dollars. Time, oftentimes months, and sometimes years. And the ability to jump through dozens upon dozens of hoops that are designed in such a way that are largely inaccessible to people with autistic traits, ironically. After which you are told that there are virtually zero support systems for you, and that society offers virtually no accommodations other than you having to literally fight for them at your place of employment, because there aren't any anywhere else like the grocery store.
I think you're being a little overdramatic.
Now add to that other marginalized identities like being a woman, a person of color, and or LGBTQIA+, and you think you might be autistic? Your chances of having a traumatic experience at the hands of the medical field go up exponentially, as do the chances of not getting an accurate diagnosis.
Fair. I still think it can be dangerous.
What is so dangerous about self-diagnosis? They can't prescribe themselves medication. They can't access therapies.
Exactly. So what's the point? If
Someone who self-diagnoses is someone who is actively looking for answers and help for the neurological reality that they are experiencing. It is highly likely that they have some neurodistinction to be willing to consider self-diagnosis of autism. Wanting an autism diagnosis certainly ain't neurotypical behavior.
or they're just doing it for the attention.
Of all the ways to get attention online, who would pick claiming to be autistic when they're not?
There are all kinds of people out there.
It was a rhetorical question, but yeah, absolutely. Someone who wants attention and wants the attention that you get for claiming to be autistic, when that attention is people like you yelling at them all the time for how awful they are for self diagnosis, and other people telling them they should unalive themselves, people gaslighting and bullying them. Ableism and haters is the attention you get even after you've blocked literal thousands of people.
Yeah, but there's that positive attention too.
Oh, yeah, from other autistic people. And that kind of positive attention is often seen as annoying to non autistic people. So, what kind of person would be more likely to say they're autistic online simply for those two types of attention?
Someone who doesn't understand the social consequences of doing so?
Which is a trait of what diagnosis?
That isn't enough to deter.
Worst case scenario, they self diagnose as autistic when they really have a different diagnosis. And in the process of learning more about autism and how it overlaps with so many other conditions, they eventually discover their true diagnosis.
Or maybe they don't, and.
Or maybe they don't. And that's probably only because a lack of access to affordable, equitable medical care, so they likely wouldn't have gotten an accurate diagnosis even without diagnosing themselves as autistic. So, in the journey of learning about autism, they will learn about accommodations. They'll find things that work for them, whether or not their actual diagnosis is autism. So, at the end of this, self diagnosis is a net positive. Your judgment doesn't do anybody any good, but you can step in and be a support to help people should you choose to set aside your ego and stop whining about people learning about themselves.
I'm still going to encourage people to get an official diagnosis.
Absolutely. I'm not opposed to getting a medical diagnosis for those who can. But how are you encouraging that? Many of these self-diagnosed people don't have the tools to deal with medical people like you who are supposed to be providing support, instead coming in and gaslighting them.
I am not gaslighting.
Imagine someone who has accurately self-diagnosed. Do you think yelling at them about how dangerous that is going to get them to respond positively to you? So the fact that your first response to a post about autism is to hop in the comments section and yell about people self-diagnosing just shows that you are not really fit to be medical staff in the autism space.
Now that is too far.
And the autistic people who are against self-diagnosis, that's incredibly toxic and ableist. It is gatekeeping and it is autism supremacy. Your autism is not more valid than someone else's autism simply because a doctor told you so. If someone accepts themselves as autistic when they aren't, that just means they've dismantled that much ableism within themselves and become an autism ally. Again, a net positive. So please tell me, how is self-diagnosis bad?
Because it makes me feel like I can't assert my own so-called expertise over people, and it empowers them to challenge my understandings of their lived experiences.
Self-diagnosis is a right. And until someone has chosen you as their provider and is getting your professional autism opinion, their self-diagnosis is none of your business. So maybe, just maybe, instead of hopping on the internet to gaslight people who are looking for help, you should instead be advocating for changes to the medical field to make it accessible and equitable for everyone. A great place to start is by dismantling your own ableism first.